Okay, so the first render of the first geometry variant and the material variant is done under the light environment. So I just chose to spin the asset in the lights really quickly to get a quick pass. And I've dumped the AOVs here as well, so you can see we've got the crypto mats, crypto primitives, and all the usual AOVs, so kind of rebuilding the beauty. And also I've got these holdouts like the reflection and reflection occlusion and shadows and whatnot, all coming from the background plate. So I've chose to render this on a black background like so with the color. So what we're going to do next, out on disk as well, these have gone to my renders location here, so it's been named Monster A Pink 01 and then the name of the HDRI, so I can kind of just quickly look and kind of go, oh yeah, that's my garden. And the go inside and its version and then just beauty like so. So what I chose to do is render multiple light rigs in one go. So you can see I've got Monster A here, and also you might see a Monster B where I've jumped forward and I've added a second monster, which we're going to do together now. So let me introduce you to the second monster and everything that we've done so far. So we're going to take a look at every single one of these. So this was all rendered just overnight in Houdini, and we'll get a quick spin of each monster in the same light rig, and then it'll switch to the next light rig, and so on and so forth until we basically loop back round to the first render. So that's going to allow me to at least see my asset spinning around with some lights and in different light rigs as well, just quickly overnight. And that contains the metadata as well to extract the name of the HDRI as well. So yeah, it was a pretty nice little setup, I think, so far for just bringing in a quick concept scope. So what we'll do now is we will delete it, well, just remove this, and we will jump back into Houdini. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add another model and then another model, and they're going to be geometry variants. So before I go any further, and before I add another model in here and maybe add materials, I'm just going to outline a few things that I've changed. So the environment map here, as you can see, it's driven by $job at HDR-res HDRI map. So if I middle click, that's kind of just going to my project folder. If you remember, we have the project ingest HDRI and then EXR like that. And you may notice it just says .exr. And that's because this res is coming from my context options here, res. So I can choose the resolution of the HDRI on disk. So I can switch to 1K, 4K. Now in my case, in this particular project, this location for my HDRIs, which is under the project structure as ingest, is in HDRI. So I've only got stuff in, I think, the 2K folder at the moment. So, and I won't be able to ship these because they are a combination of HDRI Haven and Cave Academy, where you can purchase certain HDRIs, but I'll include the ones that I've shot on my 360 camera. But ideally you'd want some kind of neutral lighting, like a studio lighting, and then a couple of like maybe ones that put this in context for your final project. So maybe the actual backplate, the actual lighting you're going to use, so the HDRI for the shot, or even just some extreme overcast and sunny, just to get a flavor of lighting and stuff. So I dump EXRs in here, and then when Houdini can find them, it will just convert them to rats, and I just leave it like that to keep it simple. So all my HDRIs are kind of being neutralized and converted to ACES CG. So we'll discuss this more when we take this asset on a future project and integrate it into some live action. We'll have it interacting with stuff outside or something. So we'll talk about this when we go and shoot something and then do something with the creature and maybe have him explode outside and land all his bits will land onto the ground or something, and we'll integrate that into a project. So just bear in mind we've got the HDRI location here, and the reason it's got no map is this final variable here, HDRI map, is coming from down here again. So if you go inside, I've created a HDRI map variable which will create a wedge count, and it will access this wedge, and I can just put the name of the maps in here like that, and that's going to return a string into this variable called HDRI map. So if I actually click on this, you'll see now that the maps are updating. You can see the very, maybe I should try a smooth shade. Probably need to fix this. The quality is not very good, is it, in the viewport? But you can see it's switching between the different kind of maps that we've got, and that's because this string is also being concatenated together with this string. So if I middle click, you get this. So this just allows me to have a quick way of, if I had different resolutions, jumping into resolutions, and also just a quick way of rendering automatically every single map that I might want. So I can define that by how many maps I want. So I could basically delete or add more, or just wedge the first one in this case. So I'm going to just set that to 5. So it's a little bit of a kind of an automation thing going off. So in this path here, I've just copied this straight into the background plate. So it's going to be used here. So I might actually just so I don't change this texture path here, I'm going to temporarily put that into the background plate, paste relative references, and I'm also projecting this HDRI onto the ground thing here. So I'm going to paste that into this projection setup here. I think I may have already done that, paste relative references. So everything gets the same feedback. So basically when we change the environment, the projection changes and the backplate changes. So this background plate, it's gonna like just produce AOVs, as I mentioned before. Like let's just fire it off. If I do Shift R, it's going to produce like the background of the HDRI, which obviously is still in a very weird format. And normally you would have your background plates changing based on like a proper, you know, format, not the latitude, but it's enough really to just show me. And it's going to project this onto this. It's going to let these shadows and reflections be projected onto this piece of geometry, which it is this grid, this circular floor here. So if I Shift R again, so that's kind of what's going off. So you can see it's going to introduce the AOVs called holdouts. So there'll be a reflection, and I'm just going to leave this as it is, because not every background is going to have the same type. Like the one that's grass may not have reflections or reflection occlusion, but it's a look dev scene, so I don't really need to integrate this in too much. So the renders will come with this, and I'll demonstrate that in just a second. So the other thing to note as well is I have put metadata, I have put the name of all of these into the file path when I render as well, so that my render is going to be named after the asset, the geometry variant, the material variant, and then the HDRI map I used. And I'm also stealing that and putting that into the metadata later on, so I could use that somewhere else, like maybe in Nuke or something. So there are just a few things that I do. Just if I'm revisiting a render, I kind of get a little bit of information about it, and I can use that later on. So if I now, we are rendering still, but if I change, you'll see we get different monsters. Now we haven't added a monster yet, but I've got a USD where I've kind of jumped forward and done this. So I'm going to quickly show you how it's switching around, and we're going to render this. And when I render this, it's not going to render this backplate, but it is going to render the AOVs associated with it. So it's going to render the new AOVs. They will come through, look, in this final AOV pass as well. So that's quite handy just for doing some comp work. So if I quickly render, and if you remember, we're rendering here at the very low kind of settings. But if I render this to disk now by using this node, dirtial generate static work items, and then I hook the output node, Houdini's going to render, and it's going to return the renders to the screen as well, because we've got some mplay monitor is switched on here. So it's going to return that into an mplay monitor. So if you're short of resources and stuff, you can turn that off and it'll just go straight to disk, and you can load that up after it's done. But I'm okay for resources, I think, in this type of render. So I'm going to leave it on just for the sake of this demonstration. So I'm going to go and cook this output node and save. So now it's going to go through and it's going to find everything I've asked for in here. So it's going to go and give me, well, it's going to, for every geometry variant, it's going to render one frame, in this case, just of all of these maps. And then it's going to wedge the material variants. Now we've only added so far one pink material variant. So I've just specified one, but we're going to add 3. And in terms of the geometry variants, in the previous one, we've only added 1, but I've added 2 more already, but we're going to go back and do this. And I'm just wedging those 3. So essentially we're going to have quite a lot of renders all set out on disk. So as these start to render this single frame, you'll see that it'll cycle through A, B, and then C on the same light rig. And the bounce light here, the projection shader is going to be using the same thing. So it's going to kind of produce the same bounce light underneath. And then when we switch to a new studio lighting, it's going to bounce like that underneath as well. So it's just a little setup I do that it just helps me look at the assets. I can render this whatever resolution I want overnight when I'm happy with stuff. And it's just a look dev scene. So it's something that you would take these renders and maybe review your own work. You could furthermore put these into contact sheets and label them directly in Houdini with cops, or you can just do it in Nuke. So these renders are going to be going to my Houdini project, obviously. So there's a few I did earlier, which is probably confusing, but this is the kind of folder structure we're going to end up with. So we're going to end up with the name of the project. So as we have the top level project, so in the Patreon directory we have monsters, and then I have the renders at the top level, so it's easy to get hold of, and then I can see if it's an asset based or if it's a shot based, and then I basically know which program I'm rendering from here. So they just get dumped in here like that. So again, this is my own structure just for my little tests. That is pretty much a quick overview of like how this stuff's working right now. Now, there are like better ways of doing this, by the way. So sidefx released a tutorial which was rather good. And it was all about the look development of a furry creature, a squirrel, and the artist generated this tool, which was rather cool. And I'm not going to like show you this tool because I just wanted to show you lops, you know, Solaris and lops, even though this is lops, but I just didn't want to go down this route just yet because I wanted to show you how you can do stuff without getting too complicated and scaring. Because if you're not coming from Houdini, if I jump into a digital asset, for example, and then start showing you his work and how he's used Python, and this is the smartest way to do it, I think. And he's done lots of like energy absorption calculations and stuff, so we can remove energy from the environment and the projections and stuff. This is very advanced stuff, and I'd go ahead and watch. I would recommend watching those tutorials. They're really good. And then this node could technically just replace pretty much this maybe, but I'm not shipping that node in my tutorial, and that's another tutorial. So there are many ways and I will be upgrading mine to something like that soon anyway. So okay, so we have the first model kind of in place. It's the placeholder. We've got the textures for it, and we know it's kind of working. So I'm going to paste this, I'm going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to bring in the next model. So I'm going to just name this to B, because that's the name of my geometry variant I want this to be. If you remember, the Geo Variant name is B, and you could make this unique to the one that's in the actual network name. Just for simplicity, I just make sure that everything I'm doing is in this subnet, and it's to do with the monster assets. I've got the geometry variant A, geometry variant B. I'm going to jump in, and it's a copy. So because now, I don't know if I mentioned this in the previous one, on disk, all of my monsters are like A, B, C, D, E, and they all have the same naming structure inside of that. So I'll just show you, each one of these comes in. So this is the next monster. So what we're viewing here is, we're viewing again two models. We've got like a high and a low, and it's been named, this is what it was named in Nomad Sculpt, and it's got a shop material. So this is the part where sometimes you have to do a lot of cleanup work, but if you can just get hold of the models and they're already organized, it's not a bad thing. So far we've got a high res and a low res. So I'm going to take a look at the high res. I'm actually going to rename it. So I basically just want to call it skin. I'm removing the path. We still have the shop material. We don't really need it on this side, so that will get flushed out at some point. Probably down this, they'll get flushed out when we send this to Painter. This doesn't go anywhere in Houdini at the moment. It very well might do one day when we bake stuff in Copernicus, and that'll be coming up soon, that tutorial. And then on the right hand side, just so you know, we've split this, and it's using the attribute at path, and it's going to be the monster, and then up name skin high. So it's basically B. So I could actually grab the name of that as well. So instead of it just saying monster, it could actually be, I'm not changing the monster because it is the monster asset, and it's probably going to work. And all that's referring to is the names on disk. This name here is basically what I'm grabbing, but you could make this procedural by just having the up name as well. So if you really want, you could copy and paste that, place that in there. So you can just grab it with this up name. So it's basically these dots are kind of saying go up 1, 2, 3 and land on this guy. So if you never know how many of these slash things to do, just count the amount of levels you have to travel up. So when you're in this component builder, this thing, it's kind of like it's like a digital asset wrapped up, and it's got a subnet inside of it as well. So the kind of side effects are hiding a lot of things from you, but you can kind of traverse up and grab that name if you want. So that just makes that always procedural. And then if you want, you can do it here as well. So but it's just totally up to you, really. It's just I'm going to be taking what I do in here in this one and pasting it as model C, and then taking a look and seeing how far I can get as well. So it's kind of like semi procedural. So as you know, we have the high res going down to Painter, and then on here we've got the switch node to make a choice whether I want to remesh this or not. I don't think I did bother remeshing. I can't, not sure if I did. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't.
Maybe I did, and maybe I didn't.
Don't think I have. I don't think I've set this up at all. No. I think I'm, just for simplicity, I'm going to just use this as is for now, because it's meant to be a very quick way. And the idea is that the model given to you is in a good place and the sculpt is usable as well. But if you needed to go in and do all the remeshing and the re-UVing, you can do it that way. So I'm going to clear this up and just remove all the attributes, give it a bit of color there so we get the skin. And then basically on the left hand side, I'm just using this as a placeholder so I can look at the skin. I'm not going to re-UV it, and then I'm going to travel all the way down this network again, creating I'm going to subdivide this. I'm going to create a VDB, and then I'm just going to try and get like an inside section like we did in the first one. So, and this is just totally an experiment really. I'm just going to use this as a negative space to store some fluid or some kind of entrails or something that we will create in effects or CFX. I'm not sure yet which department we're going to do this in. We'll certainly do all the Vellum stuff, the fatty stuff in CFX territory, but whatever really. So my machine is just screaming away because it's just going to make a VDB. So there it is. So that's a geometry now, very dense geometry. And then I'm going to make a few edits. So this is trial and error, this part where you push in stuff basically based on this guy. So you can kind of see how much negative fat you want. And you can do this with magnets and whatever you want really. You just want to make sure when you push it in you don't breach the surface. So this is one of those things, it's up to you, but I just want to have a certain thickness to this skin. So what we're doing is preparing an inside mesh to the skin, and also a new piece of geometry for the fascia to act as like a muscle and stuff like that we can control maybe, or fill with fluid. So with that, I need to clear up some stuff. And I'm going to prepare this for quad remeshes. So what I do here is I just color the whole thing in this cyan, and that's basically going to drive the quad remeshes paint which is probably going to calculate that. It's going to drive the amount of polygons that are distributed based on this vertex map attribute that this quad remesher has. So it basically, whatever value you set, like a density 1, I think it's 4 times less or something like that, and red is 4 times more or something. So there's the density, there's the vertex, use vertex color. So I'm painting density of 1, and I think that's going to be 4 times less than this density. And then I just basically want to remesh this. So I'm going to, don't think I've skipped a bit there. So I'm going to calculate the thickness. Just make sure that this skipping and recognize parameter 15 analysis, what is that? Let's just take a look at the thickness. Whoops. So there's the thickness, and I want to kind of set a red attribute on the thickness. So what I'm going to do is just basically stop viewing that. I'm going to add some color on here like that. Then I'm just going to blur it. You could be more precise with this, but I just needed to kind of give more density to the ends of these guys. And then I'm blurring that attribute now. So I'm remapping the thickness into a color. So it's white, and then it goes into this red. And then I'm smoothing I'm blurring the attribute quite a lot. I'm actually then smoothing the attribute quite a lot. And then I'm going to quad remesh this to my location. So this is going to go into the usual place. So it's going to go into the project, the assets, the name of the asset, data, modeling, geo wants to be FBX, and there it is. So it's kind of nicely tucked away as a utility mesh. And then I've already generated this. I'm not going to regenerate it. I'm going to delete any small parts because sometimes you might get 1 or 2 little points. There is kind of more things you can do with I think there's a thing called Polydoctor or something. Is it still around? Polydoctor, where you can really analyze your mesh and everything. But for the sake of speed, I'm just quickly eyeballing it and just throwing it through. And this is for me. If it was in production, I wouldn't just not pass this on to someone without testing it or anything. But I had a look at this, and all the tips seem very decent now. So this is the inside, and it's symmetrical. So I just remesh this symmetrically as well. So if you space 3, you can see, or space 2, you can see it's symmetrical. So I'm just going to add a little bit of a smooth onto this, add some normals, and then I'm going to do an auto UV. Now, auto UVing is quick, but it's not reliable. And I did it in the previous model, and it's not always reliable. So if you space 5, and then you look at this, you can go to background, you can see the UVs that they're on this. I've put this on the second tile here, so the skin's going to go on here and the fascia is going to go on here. So I don't know if you can shift that, actually. I've never tried. So I'm going to just check to see whether there is any overlap on here, and there is a little bit of overlap, which is kind of we expect that. So what that means is basically when you're baking stuff, well, it's just really bad UVs, but when you're baking stuff, you're going to get problems with the normals, and just if you're using UVs for anything else and there's stuff like this, it could trip up a few calculations. So I just set up a manual kind of workflow for doing some UVs, which it's a little slower, but we'll take a look at it now. So here comes the model with no UVs. And then I'm just going to, by the way, I haven't UV'd in years, so I'm just going to clip this and work on half. And then I created a load of groups like so to try and create some seams. So what I essentially did is I did a group SOP here like that. And I set this to probably edges. And then as soon as you click on this, you can start to go in, and if you just hover and double click, you can follow along like that. And if you hover over and hold Shift and A, and then if you middle click, it will draw a line, and you can kind of follow the line across and then just pull off like that. Then you held Control, and you could double click again. You can kind of get like a seam. So if you do Shift A, middle click and drag along, then break off the auto line, and then Control and click, and then press Enter to store that. That stores your cutting group. So, you know, after doing that this way, I didn't really know. Just thinking of this as a symmetrical thing, I'm going to do a UV flatten. So it's going to try and take each one of these patches and flatten them out on top into UV space. So you're going to get this kind of thing all just laid out in 0 to 1, and you've got overlaps. So I'm going to use a UV layout to just grab that like so, and there's no more intersections. Yeah, then I'm just going to group one side, and then I'm going to mirror this, if I go space 1, so I'm going to mirror this across. This is the temporary geometry. This is the original geometry. Then I'm going to transfer the UVs across. So we have, where are they? Where's it gone? Oh, yeah. So we've still got like the group here. And then I'm just going to do a UV flatten again. But this time this was just like me previewing what it's going to look like on 1/2. And then you're essentially starting again on the clean mesh. So I'm going to do a UV flatten, but this time I'm going to use the split group, which we established up here. Let's just delete that example. So I basically mirrored that group across. So now it exists as a mirrored group here. And then I'm just going to remove distortion, do a UV layout, and do it like that. That's the quickest way. I think it took me about 15 minutes. I haven't UV'd anything in years, so it's probably really bad UVs. So now we should have some UVs. Maybe if there they are. So there's no overlapping there, and they're on the right tile. So that was basically a little pit stop for UVing. We'll see how we get on with that. So I decided to use this, add a bit of color to them. I didn't bother doing the UVs on this side. I'm going to have a look and see how bad that is. So I'll just turn off the UV stuff. And then I'm going to give this fascia a name like that. So we've just got basically a bunch of attributes. I'm going to do a cleanup now just to kind of organize myself a bit more. So we've got basically obviously position and normals and color, the name, UVs, and coverage, and some other stuff that needs to be removed as well. So that could be detail attributes could be removed. So that should have removed them now. So what else do we need? Do we need the split group anymore? I don't think we do, but we'll catch that later on, I think. So, and the next I'm going to calculate the thickness again and group. Probably just soft peak this in a little bit, and then globally soft peak these, and then just smooth that out a little bit. And then add a rest position, clean up all the attributes. Let's see what we've got. No peak, don't think we need that group. Edge group, split we don't need. So this is basically going to catch this as well. So we should basically now just have a very clean mesh. So I'm just kind of adding stuff and deleting it as I need it. So we've got the fascia that can be saved to disk. So there he is. So that's kind of like pretty much come from the sculpt, hasn't it? So it's basically a nice way of getting something. So I might need to just smooth off some of the, no, it might be all right. But that's going to give us quite a lot of fat and fleshy stuff. When this explodes, you'll have this thickness to it. So meanwhile, we'll color this mesh separately and we'll do a Booleans operation, and then we'll just add brand new normals, give a new name, add a rest position, and give that region attribute, which is dedicated to the inside of this skin. And then we'll bake him out as well. So we've got the skin. So essentially, if I bring both of these into here, like so, I'll just merge them in. I can color the skin red. I can color the inside of the skin green and the fascia blue, and I can take a look inside. So you can kind of see what we've got. Don't really need to do the alpha. It doesn't really visualize very well. So they are now ready. They are going to go into this section because this is still within the component builder, and this is usually what you get in the component builder. I've just chosen to use the SOPs area to do all of my model creation and ingest and naming and cleaning and everything. It just keeps it quite tidy under one area. I'm going to bring in the skin and the fascia together. I'm clipping it just temporarily just to look inside, just to make sure everything's been applied. And then I'm going to poly reduce everything. Now you could customize the poly reductions per component within this asset, so the fascia and the skin. And then this should now, if I press U, should just come back out as the same thing, but like as another geometry variant. So we have that already. So there's no materials on it right now. So there's no point adding materials until we've actually got material texture pack to work with. So what I'll do is I'll branch over to this side and I will take the original sculpt, which this is linked all the way up to here where we extracted it from the hard drive and brought it in and renamed it. And then I'm going to move this over to one side. Yep, I'm merging in the fascia as well from here, just as a temporary thing, and you'll see why in a minute. And then I'm moving this over, so I really should really move the... Yeah, I think that's okay. I am literally just moving this over here. And then the ambient occlusion again is just to create, we talked about this before, just to create some vertex colors on here. It's not totally actually necessary. It's just I like to remind myself that you can bake some custom vertex color into a texture map. You could do this in Copernicus as well. And then I'm going to create the path. So we get the high path here, and this is what Substance is going to use. Substance Painters are going to use that high and the name and the underscore high to identify it belongs in one piece of geometry. So we'll talk about this in Substance. So I'm going to bake that out to an FBX. So they're my high res pieces of geometry I'd like to bake down. And the reason I've moved them apart is because I'm going to bake the high res onto the low res. So the low res comes in like so, which is just the product of these two together. And then I'm going to remove the inside. So if you remember this thing has like an inside to it, which is that kind of purple pink thing, just to avoid any issues. Maybe clean that up, and I'm going to give this a path. So it's exactly the same set of geometry. So it's got the, let's just go back to here. So we've now got the fascia low, and we'll have the skin low. So we have a skin low and a skin high coming in from either side here. So essentially, I'm going to remove all groups, and I'm going to save that to disk. So what I've sent to Painter is essentially high res named fascia low and skin low, and then the low res fascia low and skin low. But I've also included a shop material path here that's built off of the name. So this will allow me to isolate them visually as well in Substance Painter. so let's just keep that in mind, and let's take a look at the let's make sure that this is also moved across. So these are low res meshes here. All right. And we're going to, I nearly forgot to do that. We're going to save those out. So we basically have the low res geometry on the outside, the skin, and the low res fascia. And then we have the high res skin and fascia, which are just for baking in Painter. So we've exported the high res FBX and the low res FBX, and we've exported that again using this little path that I pretty much didn't change. If you just take note, this huge thing has been resolved from concatenating things from this controller here, which is also automated. So the asset name is monster and the geo variant is B, and the location is basically going to the project assets monster data modeling geo monster B. So I didn't have to worry about the distribution of my data there. So I can trust that that on this project is going to be in the right place. So just to show you that, if I go to the assets, I'm actually going to place this under the monster asset, and it's going to go under specifically for Painter. So it's going to be under monster B, and you'll see there is the high and the low res FBX there. So I've already got a scene here, but I'm going to start again and show you how we're going to do this. So in Painter, what we could do, because we've already got a scene set up, we have monster A, and we've only got one material variant. I'm just going to load that up. So if you remember, you might not have seen this, but this is kind of like the same scenario. But I'm going to save this as monster B, and I'm just going to save into monster underscore B, and I'm going to save that there, yeah, like that. And then it's just a case of all the layers we've got, the fascia and the material skin on the low res here, that you can isolate and see independently. Obviously they're in the wrong place, but we'll sort that out in just a second. But the material shot path is going to basically allow Substance Painter to identify which kind of object belongs on a certain layer in a certain UV space, I believe. So that's quite handy. If you remember the material shot path, which we have in here, came from just a wrangle node I did to kind of make that in here. So that's basically making those. So I can control exactly what things are called, what attributes are on it, and everything like that. Even though this has come from the iPad onto the PC, I'm just controlling everything now and cleaning it all up. So I know So this has been saved. So what I like to do is I like to go project configuration, select, and then I will go to my project. So monsters, assets, monster DCC, digital content creation, painter monster B, and I'm going to import the low model and click OK, and it's going to re-import the low model. Now the UV is going to be all messed up, right? Because it's different UVs. But it means it's worked. And if I go to isolate, I can select each one and work on them differently. And you can see I've got these painter layer stacks down here. So what I will do then is I'll just save this one more time, and then I'll start baking. So I'll just come over to the bake tab here, and this is going to try and import the existing saved painter high-res bake thing. I'm going to delete that like this, and then I'm going to load in the one we saved out from Houdini just now. So again, it's this high-res version here. I'm going to click open, and then you should see a cage form, and then it's up to you to evaluate if you want to try and get these little bits out and stuff. I'm just going to leave it for now, but there are, as a substance painter texture artist, you would be trying to avoid this, and you might have separate scenes to bake out separate things. The reason this is happening is because my high res and my low res, if you remember from the previous one, we had a few issues with the remeshing not quite touching the edge. I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to move forward, and I'll kind of come back to that later on. But this is a great starting point. So for the material skin, this guy, we're going to bake out all of these maps to assist us with the procedural texturing. And then for the fascia, we're going to do the same. So I've kept the settings the same. So this is the part where you would bake the textures out, whatever resolution. Usually when I'm starting out, I just all work at 1K and just get everything baked out. And I just feed them into the conversion into Houdini to turn them into rats and just use that as a placeholder. So this is the part where your texture artist would agree on a place to work maybe, or you'd agree with yourself and keep your pipeline consistent so you know where things are. So as it's baking out the one on the left, it's trying to apply it to the one on the right, which is just probably a painter error, but it doesn't really know, I think. So, well, it's probably to do with the UV tiles of this mesh, but it's going to basically work. It's going to bake the one on the left, and then it's going to reveal the one on the right. It's going to get its maps as well, so it will look okay. So it doesn't take too long, a couple of minutes, if that, really. But like I said, I'm baking out at pretty much all the samples are at max. I don't know if I can still operate this while it's, no. But all the occlusion samples and the curvature samples and the bent knot, everything's just at the maximum at the moment, which isn't usually how I would start a project. I'd just set that to 512 because it's more about getting the data in place and saving out as a texture pack. And even the smart materials, I'm just going to save this as the first material variant, which is copying pretty much the same material from the first guy. So you could literally load up like Monster A pink 01 and make it Monster B pink 01. And you could load up Monster A pink 02 and make that Monster B pink 02. So you could steal those. So it's still kind of not as procedural as like doing something in Houdini, but it allows you to kind of leave Houdini and do some nice texture work in Substance Painter or bring in these texture packs. But I'm going to be doing, I've done stuff where I've just used Copernicus a little bit as on top of Painter stuff, and sometimes just exclusively Copernicus. But in my opinion, because Copernicus cops, the new cops, it's quite new, it's quite powerful, but I've used Painter a lot longer, and I'm just going to feel whatever you feel comfortable in, really. But sometimes using the new Copernicus is actually really good for just getting a ton of stuff out, like especially procedural things like this thing on the right is going to be like a red veins and warts and fleshy type thing. I don't know, but it was just smart material I stole and just changed it. So it's just literally something really quick. And I might even just send that off to FX and CFX and see how it holds up just in the lighting and then revisit this scene. So it's baked. I can return and you'll see that there they are with their, if I just cycle through the maps, you've got the ambient occlusion, the curvature is obviously useful for the smart materials, the position, and you can do all this in Copernicus, don't remember. Opacity's not being used, normals, world space, ID, ambient, well, you get the idea. So you've got a set of maps of your choice, and you've got these models. Now, they're in the wrong place, so we don't need to change the bake FBX, which is this thing, the painter high. We don't need to change that. So what you could do is just temporarily go into Houdini and align the low res back to the origin and save that. Let's just save Houdini. And then if you go back to Painter and go edit, re-import the mesh, it re-imports the low res mesh, meaning it's just going to bring in what we've saved from Houdini, and then it'll quickly go, oh, okay, got a new mesh. Let's load all your existing bake maps in on your layer stack and all your materials and everything. So that's at the origin now. So we've got this thing, this monster design, this iPad sculpt. You can see there's some baking issues here. So we'll ignore that for now because I don't want to go into Painter, and this stems back to like UV mapping and good topology and stuff, but it's a concept sculpt and we might not even see it. So I'm just going to move forward. Whoops, my viewer's gone a bit weird. But if you set this eyeball to isolate, you can see that you can work on individual layer stacks. So I could work on the weird. So this is the one that we UV'd up. So you could work on this a little bit more. So this is all good. And it didn't take too long. I'd probably normally just plow through this if I'm not talking to people while I'm doing it. But I'll save this file, and it's monster B ping 01. Now this name's important. I'm going to use the name of the project to name my textures. So if you want to, you could have a work folder called monster_b ping 01 and then 001 and just do all your increments and all your work, and then save the master file when you want to publish somewhere to call it this if you want. So once this is saved, I'm going to export these textures, and then we're just going to convert them to rats, and I'm just going to apply the rats straight into the USD. So I'm not even going to use EXRs because I'm not leaving Houdini in this case, so it just makes more sense. Oh, it's finished. So we'll go File, Export Textures. This is what I'm wanting to export. It's going to the right top level structure. It's using my custom template here, and I'm using EXR's 60-minute float. That custom template here, you can make your own. So essentially I have my own there. So, and I can change this up, and this gets saved to my cloud, and it's across, I can access this across multiple machines as well. So I stole this one from one of the PBR folder textures. I can't remember, is this one. I stole it from there and then just started copying and pasting, making my own. So these folders are going to go to $project. It's going to be called monster_b ping01, and it's going to be a name of the map, I guess, and then the project and the UDIM. You can make this however you like. Should really put the color space in there. But that's pretty much what we're going to get, this texture pack. So I'm going to export that. So that's that. So we now have on disk, so we have the painter and the autosave, and this painter_high is basically storing the relationship of like this scene has these models in it basically, and that's why it's all locked. So when you're done with painter, you can save the settings and you can close painter down. I'll just save it one more time and then we'll close it. It's closed. So the actual, there you go, you can see this has kind of released that lock file. So this is like a little package for that asset. And the nice thing is about it is this lives in the painter directory under the monster asset here. So on the project, I've got, the painter files in there along with my USD generation for this particular asset. So if I need the textures for this asset, I would put them, I like publish the data in textures, so it's in here. So you'd have this new, oh, we've got one for C. I must have been experimenting. I'm going to remove that. So we've got this texture pack. So we have the two UV tiles. like so. Now this will contain, let's see whether I can use, yeah, so I've set my EXRs to open with DJV, but yeah, you've got this skin and fascia base color and different UV tiles, so they'll get loaded up in the UV space that we need them to be. And I'm just doing it like that for now. And it depends on what model and how complicated it is. I can change this system. So these are all EXRs, and some of these I don't use. Like I'm not actually using the metallic in this project, and I'm not using the emissive, and I'm not using ambient occlusion. So if you don't need them, don't bake them, or just delete them straight off. But I just, while I'm, you know, just playing with things, I just leave them in, and I'll kind of sort that out later. So we are done, basically, just quickly bringing something in. And then what we're going to do is just basically start applying the rest of this node structure here. So I'm just going to grab this and go Alt, drag it across, and then just plug it in. So there's no like looping around. You could loop all of this as well, but and I've done that in the past for things that I didn't really need to be creative about. So like rocks and stuff, you could, if you nail one of the looks on all your variants, so let's say you have 3 different variants and you've done the look dev on each 3 materials, but you've got 24 of these, you could loop round, and I've done some tutorials on that. But this is more about like bringing in a concept and just getting stuff out, and then maybe look deving individual material passes, material variants. So what have we got here? We've got the temporary, the dicing. So this should all be fine because it's always applying it to the top level of the asset. And then the next thing is just to name this something to be like B, and then this goes B and this goes O1. And then inside of, not this one, don't go in there, inside of this material library, I'm just going to switch that to B. And then if I wanted to make any more tweaks to the material, I can have a unique setup here. I don't care. I'm just going to use the same one for simplicity. And then I'm going to plug him in. Now this would work. It would just, well, it wouldn't work technically because my shader defaults in here are set to rat. But if I set this to EXR, it would just load all the EXRs in and convert them to rats right next to the folder that we were just viewing. So it would dump the rats for the base color in here. I kind of don't want that. I just want to create my own rats for now and have them like in, you know, in their own folders. So like this is what we've got so far. So I'm going to press U and jump up, and I've got this rat gen as you've seen before. And this time I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab just everything from B01 because that's all I have. So that's all I need to do. So I'm going to dirty old generate static work items. Now, something that caught me off the other day is if you already have a folder with those in, this thing will complete instantly and it won't change. It won't make any commitments. And it was to do with this is set to automatic. If you already had that folder that you're about to generate on disk because you've been doing several versions, then it wouldn't necessarily force it to write the files out. So I'm just writing out all the time to the same location. But if you were working on like versioning and stuff, then you might be okay. It's down to you. But for simplicity, I'm going to dirty old generate and cook, and it's going to save. And that's going to load up as many as I need it to. And it's going to dump that into to confirm it, the folder B. I think we might have just seen that get created. As it converts those to rats, the folders will be created. So going back to what I said earlier about being optimized, if you didn't use things at all, texture sets here, these, just delete them and then you won't get the rats, or you can just tidy up afterwards. I tend to just have a little cleanup afterwards to see what I didn't actually use. So they're all done. So there's the rats for everything in there. So in theory, this should just work now. So we should get like a peak. So if again we're viewing the proxy and we've chopped him in half. So if I press Shift R, we should just get some textures on this guy, hopefully. Yeah, so they're the substance painter maps applied. So that confirms it's worked. And that's as far as I want to take it right now. then I will bring this into the USD asset like so, and I'll just save that USD asset for now. So the next few models are going to be like the same, but I'm going to do another video where I've got a more complicated model, and then we'll kind of finish the tutorial, and we'll have, hopefully by the end of it, we'll have a monster asset. So we've got this USD asset that we've just saved this onto disk, and we're reloading it in here. Then I'm going to switch to 1 like so, and then we've already discussed things like this. So just to recap, we've got these like automated HDR maps and everything called loading in, and we've got the surface texture here, the floor texture is being projected in, and it's the HDR map as well. And we've got the background shader as well, kind of linking in from that. So everything's looking at the same HDRIs. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in and have a look at what I need to do. And I've got 5 wedges, so I might run this overnight and render all of these. It's a bit overkill, quite honest. Pick your favorite ones. And then the material count, I've only got 1. It's much easier and less headache if you have the same amount of materials for each geometry variant, but it's not. There are workarounds obviously, but just for me, if you think about it, I only have 1, so I'm just pulling in 1. I've just preempted I'm going to have 2 and 3, and as you saw how easy it would be to load up that painter scene, save the version out, and then just bake out the maps after you've tweaked the material obviously, and you get variants and stuff. So we'll do a little bit of that, but that's the time consuming part, but it's still fairly quick to get a variation of materials onto one asset. So the Geo variant, I'm going to pull in 2 A and B. So I'm going to go up, Dirty Alt, and generate the static work items. I'm going to set my frame range. I'm going to look through my render settings here like so, and then I can just pick a map and then press Shift R to take a look at this. And then I'm going to just drop down to my low so it doesn't, destroy my machine. It shouldn't destroy my machine. It should be fairly quick. So that's that. So we can now just quickly switch models, and obviously this has the turntable thing. We can kind of review the model, and then eventually we will be switching light maps as well if you really wanted to as well. So I'm going to render these every time I create a new model. I'll render these and then I'll upload them into Nuke and do a presentation turntable. So what I would do is, if I render these now, as I mentioned earlier, they would go to disk and they'd be named basically Monster A, the geometry variant, and then Pink 1 or whatever it was called. What do we call it? Yeah, Monster B Pink 01. So it would just be called Pink 01 because that's the Geo variant that we've made. And then the name of the light map, which I'm just appending. You could put that in a subfolder or whatever you want to do. So they're all going to go to disk, and I could just render those out. So what I normally do is I just start kind of blocking out. I know that this monster asset is going to have 4 or 5 different versions of it in there, obviously without the clipped geometry. And it's going to have maybe 3 textures each. So I've got one asset that I can just constantly play with on future tutorials, which is going to be a lot of Vellum and effects work and things like that. So, and this asset will be there in the files as well that you can download. It's not an award-winning model, by the way. You can find your own better models quite easily. Or if you're good at modeling, do a better job, spend more time on it. So that's pretty much the quick overview of like how I would quickly like get a concept in and then just copy and paste the templates out. Now, I'm not saying that these are all approved, but if you were to render all these to disk, and if we were to have like, if I go back to the monsters project at the top level, when I render everything, I just render to the top level. and under assets, and then from Houdini, and it renders like this. So you can see we've got these renders come through like so, and then I'll just put them into Nuke. You could do this in Houdini as well, so you could kind of comp this in Houdini, but I prefer to, there's nothing wrong with doing it in Houdini, but I prefer to just set up a comp in Nuke. So these renders go to, well, you guessed it, Monsters project and assets, and then Nuke, and then I throw them here. So there's the beauty, you know, this thing's coming in. It's been scaled up. I don't know why I've scaled it up, to be honest. And then there's the HDRI version here like that, and then there's the occlusion comp. So I will get a bit more organized in distributing these, because if you've got a lot, then you're going to have to, you know, it depends on how many models you want to view and stuff. And this is why maybe doing the comps in Houdini and sticking them through a top network could actually be beneficial. But the chances are, I prefer to do things in Nuke a little bit more as well. But you get to see, review your own work. You can see the noise stopped, the renderer stopped denoising as the light spun around, which I'm going to investigate. It's happened to me once before that, and I re-rendered just that piece and it worked. But there you go. So anything else? Yeah, so if, for example, a certain pass didn't work out, and when you render this, it renders everything. But if you just take this and right click and cook this, providing your output node is set to the full, sorry, your output node is set to the specific same frame range, it will just render just that task. So you'll just get one pass for monster B and this light pass. So yeah, and you're going to see what you're getting as well. So it's quite nice. So that's kind of like the initial setup here for this monster asset. What this means now is we do have a nice place. So this USD asset is completely independent. It's basically sitting on disk on the project. So it's kind of project asset. It's in here, asset monster, and he's right there, right in there. So that's the whole thing. So the textures have been converted over. Now you might see some EXR things in there. This is because beforehand I rendered with EXRs and it threw them in there. So one thing to do is just to see a fresh copy of this. If you've still got Houdini open and you want to make sure you've got a clean version, just version up like so, and then save that out. When this is finished saving, this guy will show up complaining and everything else can just reload. But it tends to look like it's breaking everything until you reevaluate. And there you go. So you've got version 2. So instead of being like up here, it's here. And then you've got like a bit more kind of structure in here. So you can see your textures are now kind of named after the asset, as well as the color and things, and the UV tile and stuff. So it depends how you want to do this. In some companies, they're very strict on things like that. I don't work in texturing in companies, so I just made my own thing up that was easier for me to understand. So, but you can see how you can change this up a little bit. So if textures are not connected, they won't be converted and they won't be sent over to this textures folder. So the reason they're getting sent over with the USD asset, which seems like you're duplicating your data, and you are, because what it's actually done is copy everything in this USD file over into here, as opposed to it now being inside of the textures. So instead of it being inside of like A and B, it's just copied them all over into one little package, so you can use that on a different project. So you could load up, put a fresh copy of Houdini, and it would just work. So I'll show you. So here's Houdini, and I'm on the stage, and if I just go asset reference like so, and we're not in a, no, that's the wrong one. Asset reference, this guy, and then there's somebody in there, looks like Tommy's joined the party with his shirt on. I wonder if this is actually real, that real guy. He walks around sidefx going, yeah, I need to be more muscle. Anyway, so basically I basically have the USD asset and it was on the job, so I'm just going to go and get it from here. So it's monsters. You could basically what you could do is move this asset anywhere you like and it will just work. So if I go to the monsters assets, monsters USD, oops, version 2, I should technically be able to copy this somewhere. And rename it something, and then I should be able to go and find that asset. So, and it'll be this monster file here, like so, and he should load in. And as you can see, we have the completely separate project. If you want to use this on something else, and then you can say monsters, and then you've got the monsters USD thing, and you've got the variant here, so you can actually see there's 2 monsters, there's A, and you'll see what's happening there, and there's material variant pink on 1 pink version there. So obviously I wouldn't ship this with him cut in half like that. If you shift R, you get that headlight rendering and the viewport rendering, so you get like an asset you can play with really quickly. So if I disable that, you get the default configuration, which is always the last, it's always the last one in the USD structure. So it's basically just happens to be monster B, and that's that. So I'm just showing you that's kind of like the nice thing about these. There's a lot of stuff that when I'm working on a future project, it'd be nice just to grab an asset and like practice some Vellum or do some effects work on it and stuff like that. So let's just go to Karma. I don't know why it did. I think by default when you do Shift R, it defaults to CPU by default, and then if you Shift R again, whenever I do it again, it'll just remember you were in Karma XPU. So there he is. So there's the asset that we're going to start building up and playing with in future tutorials. So hopefully that's been useful to you all. Thanks for your time. If you're finding this tutorial useful, why not drop a like and let me know in the comments. And if you're interested in learning more Houdini, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next tutorial.